I love beautiful people, beautiful beaches, hot sunny weather, land of chance, land of mountain, land of bedrooms. I let me salon, I let me salon, I let me salon. Don't let come here. Beautiful nation, beautiful country. Beautiful people, beautiful culture. Sweet, sweet, sweet salad. Sweet salad. Oh, let me salad. Sweet, sweet, sweet salad. Sweet salad. Oh, let me salad. Now come country, now sweet country. Before we unite, before we can love one another, before you can change your attitude. East, west, from the south, let me let me suck and let me get it back here. Let me let me stand. Beautiful nation, beautiful country. Beautiful people, beautiful culture. Sweet, sweet, sweet salad. Sweet salad. Oh, let me salad. Sweet, sweet, sweet salad. Sweet salad. Oh, let me salad.
Today is Sunday, the 22nd of July 2018. We get for kickstart this program 1 hour 30 minutes as was originally planned, and obviously apologies for that because I've been here for cover one event, and obviously the event kickstarts late, so everything else just sort of fall late. So instead of 8 o'clock, I'm an hour and 30 minutes, behind, because I actually just arrived a few minutes ago and just click the system on and decide to run through this quickly. Normally, probably if I don't call them off, but Sunday now a routine day, so the few people that will get, they will watch the tape later. It's no problem. But it's a significant issue we want to talk about today when the thing where they go on back home in the country, Sierra Leone, and this regard fuel price. So we know the significance of fuel, ladies and gentlemen, energy. So now I make we title this production of this broadcast, Energy Crisis vis-a-vis petrol price hike, whether na mother bill, na number of this. Okay? So we all know say petroleum products, that include transportation for fuel, or involve Bokubokuti. We're not able to name them. Okay, transportation for fuel oil for heating, whether not electricity, generation. Then one way that they use for make road, and we get Bokuboku road project in the country not too long ago, and I believe this they continue under the new government because the national call. Okay, and for feed livestock, chemical, plastic, synthetic material, and everything. I mean, this particular product, they make the world go round. And without this product, trust me, we will go back into Stone Age. We will use them in the everyday activity, everyday life. Whether you want to say directly or indirectly, we use energy in our everyday life. Petrol, diesel, kerosene, or for other direct use, because remember, say and therefore refine them for they arrive at then various I make they call them petroleum products. So products that are the offshoots from petroleum. Okay. So we say without this, honestly, life will go back to Stone Age, to be honest. Everything we remember now this world here, I got for do with fuels. Now I make you say, I mean petroleum. I make you say without it, fellow, either the world ground to a halt where we as human beings don't allow, or we go back to Stone Age where if you look, like in a farm, you will see either they use animal them or waterman themselves at the invention of the wheel for take the wheel go round, where the wheel self in itself have been one other big invention. But unfortunately, because of the toxicity of this particular product, the demand and the politics around them, every benefit we as a people sort of get, it's sort of they diminish. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Spain. It's sort of they diminish, the benefits they diminish at the pump. Okay, let me just acknowledge a few people. I'm not sure whether I want to get the beginning part of the tape because when I join after, but I really do appreciate, but because this is a very serious subject matter. I say I mean, cover one event, say the summer, there's so much going on. So I go cover one event, the event obviously jumpstart late, so everything else fall behind. So I get caught up in the time. And imagine all of you in the chat room now, wonderful. Can we spread and share this video, please? Okay. Mr. Mohamed Kamara, welcome. Mr. Roland Karimu, Mr. Victor Spain, Ajay Kwabinga Sapong, first timer. Welcome to you, my brother and friend. Mr. Emzo Fofana, Julia Rogers, Timo Sachs. I say welcome to you all. We just to talk about the seriousness of petroleum and what this product, the byproduct from petroleum get for do with petrol, I mean with them everyday life. Without this thing, the offshoots of it, when fuel, diesel, and you name it, life will basically ground to a halt. But because of us being human beings, and we won't allow this to happen because the basic effect now survival, that means we will reduce ourselves back into Stone Age, that everything what we do will be manual labor. Okay? So that's how significant this thing is. Everything that we do, whether artificial limb, whether the woman and hair colors, whether for go watch movie or the product from a movie film, whether lenses, whether the glasses we wear, or my clothes, or the drinking cup, or the car, the fan belt, the shaving cream, whatever. That's how significant this thing is. Okay? But in the politics of petroleum products, we find ourselves, me and you, the people, as a victim. And this is exactly what we want to talk about here today. Every gain that we realize is diminished or wiped away by weak currency. So some of the issues that we are facing today is because of the currency. When you pair them or power them against the greenback, what people call the greenback or the United States dollars, which is the universal unit for transaction, with currency is very weak because there's nothing showing it up. So it just will go from height to height, very weak against the US dollar. So that they affect basic economics. I'm not an economist. By the way, I did invite somebody not to talk about the politics, but to come and talk, about economics, inflation, how these things work, because now that's his own area of expertise, so that he could have made this thing very much more easy for us to understand. Because I cannot make it easy in my layman's view, okay? But unfortunately, the person not be available at the last minute, he get for pull out due to some other engagement. However, we will use the basic economic know-how, here for arrive at what we will try for go through. What is important, ladies and gentlemen, is for us to understand the importance that fuel price is made up of different components. Now, it make up the fuel price. So it's not that money that we pay at the pump when we fill up our tanks and etc. goes exactly or all of it to the cost of the product itself, fuel. Okay, it's not so. I noticed that some more people have joined. I'm really appreciating this. Wow, Mr. C. Brapo, welcome to the program, sir. Very first timer. Thank you so much for joining. I was just talking about the weakness of the currency as against the US dollar, which is causing some of the headache that we are going through, or our people are going through, because of the hike in price of petroleum. Okay, we're saying that every gain that we're supposed to make in terms of the cost of petrol is wiped away because of we currency, our weak currency against the United States dollar or the greenback. Okay, the weakness of the leons is significant in the cost that we pay at the pump, and also the international price of petrol, because we're not an oil producer at all. So therefore, we pay more price when the barrel of oil goes up. But the funny thing here is, ladies and gentlemen, because of product that fluctuates up and down, why don't we benefit when the price comes down? Why don't we? Because we should. If we should pay the cost when the price goes up, why don't we pay the cost when the price comes down? Why? These and many other things we want to talk about shortly on this program. And by the way, those of you on the program, tomorrow we are having a one-to-one, an interview with Mr. Alpha Saidu Bangura, who's supposed to be a household name. Mr. Alpha Saidu Bangura will be right on this channel tomorrow on a one-to-one, hopefully at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, but I will keep you posted. This is just the breaking news that Alpha Saidu Bangura will be on this show tomorrow, 8 p.m. That's an hour and 30 minutes from where we are now. It's about 9:30, 9:40. So push the clock about 1 hour, 40 minutes. Alpha Saidu Bangura will be on this program. Not straying away from the topic, it's important that we understand that the price of fuel, like I said, is made up of many different components. And these are margins that are added to the cost at the pump. It's a bit of a complex situation, not very complex, but for most of us, it is, because we go to the pump and pay the money, but there are many other components attached to it. Some of the costs that are pushed onto us is that of storage. Storage is significant to store petrol, and also to transport it from point A to point B is kind of significant. Significant. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a copy of the government supplementary budget, again, which I wanted to discuss with the host, not on a political scale, but just to explain to us what some of the technical terms in a budget will imply. Unfortunately, again, we don't have that guest, so we'll have to, do with what we have available. We were saying, ladies and gentlemen, that every liter paid for at the pump, it has a significant portion of it that goes towards indirect taxes. Did we know that? I know some of us will know, some of us don't care to know. All we need is the product. But the tax that we are taxed at the pump, a significant portion of the money that we pay at the pump goes towards other taxes. Indirect taxes, by the way. So sometimes we don't know that tax is taken away there for road construction, okay? For some other governmental projects that eventually the people are meant to benefit from. So when oil prices plunge on the international market, it turns out that even it's an issue about demand and supply, by the way. That's why I was saying that this is sort of kind of basic. Demand and supply. Those of us that did, high school economics, we know the laws or rules of demand and supply. But it's not only limited to demand and supply. There's plenty of politics in the nature of oil, crude oil, if you like. The advent of the discovery or the tapping, because they knew they had it, that's US shale oil production. It continues to make the price of oil to drop, because the US is one of the heaviest consumer of oil, probably coming around with China and other major industrialized countries like India and others. But since the US started tapping the shale reserve, that has affected the price of oil. So if the price of oil, we should pay the cost when it goes up, why don't we enjoy the benefit when the cost comes down? Some countries, as we may know, feel the pinch of the cost of oil more than others during periods like when the prices go up. Rentier economies are the ones that suffer when the price of oil come down. Rentier economy, by that I mean countries whose economy is based largely, significantly on oil, like Russia, for example. Although they've diversified their economy and reduced the dependence of oil by almost 50%. But prior to now, they had their oil market so dependent on their oil market that anything reflecting on the cost of oil, because they produce oil, that affects them seriously. But like I said, it's a major industrialized country, so they've diversified their oil. Nancy Joseph, please like my official for you post. Okay, just receiving text messages as we go by. So they diversified that. So are other countries as well, but not all of them have done so. Typical example will be the Venezuela. Remember the home of former charismatic leader Hugo Chavez. They've suffered so much because of sanctions that have been put on them. They sit on one of the, if not the heaviest reserve of crude oil. But yet, because their economy is a rentier one, they are struggling badly. Okay? We're just giving the politics and the nature of oil because we will come back home. We are not an oil producer, but we don't enjoy the benefit of the prices coming down, but we pay the cost when the price goes up. So we're saying that some countries feel the pinch more than others. So rentier economies such as Venezuela, they suffer a lot when the prices of oil go down. Lower prices of oil also means inflation. All of these are directly or indirectly affect us as a consumer. When there's a glut of oil, in other words, there's oil saturation, too much oil around, it causes deficit. These are all economic terms. Hopefully, it's basic, so we do understand this in the forum here this evening. So the oil glut causes deficit in the economics of countries largely that produces oil during this particular period of oil saturation, if you like. When increases are made, they should be done in line with inflation. Significant, because this goes back directly to us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking about the situation in Sierra Leone as today, as we speak today. The price of fuel has gone up by another 2,000 leones. It was 6,000, difficult for the people to shoulder. But like I said, we cannot do without it. So somehow we have to dig deep to continue to make life, possibly find a way around life, because life must go on. But then, just a few weeks ago, the price is again gone up. 2,000 leones has been added to an already difficult 6,000 leones. But the owners of transportation vehicles will continue to buy. And as they buy, they pass on the cost to the people. And if it's a country where employment is in short supply, then you can imagine what's going on. So we talk about transportation largely, and it's because transportation is so central. That's why when price goes up for this basic commodity, it becomes a problem in the country, because it involves a whole lot. That's why I took my time to start with the significance of energy vis-a-vis fuel or petroleum products. It is a possibility, ladies and gentlemen, that if the leones, that's the national currency of the Republic of Sierra Leone, continues to weaken against the US dollar, of course, the potential for the price to go up again is looming. It's looming real. Okay? It's really looming real. The leones and the dollar exchange rate is basically used as an average in our situation. And what I want you to look at or compare is the average before and after election. The leones have certainly lost ground significantly and continue to do so. And every time it does that, the people suffer. And from what I'm gathering now, it is becoming very inconvenient and people are beginning to complain and people are beginning to protest. Just the other day, there was an arrest or two that somebody from civil society, I think a guy called Mr. Abu, was arrested. I haven't gone deep into that story, but I know that he promised that if the price of oil or fuel was going to be bumped up, which eventually happened, he did say that he was going to protest. And when the price was increased, he did come out to protest. But whether he did that in accordance with the law, that's what I don't know as yet. Because even though you've got a right to protest, you equally have a right to seek a permit from the government. And the government need to organize and issue that permit, allowing you to protest or exercise your civic duty or your franchise as a citizen. Did he do that? I don't know as yet. But what I'm saying is, it's becoming really inconvenient for our people, so they are beginning to complain. It's beginning to rumble. Okay? So we do know that the Leones is losing ground significantly because the government has not been able to stabilize it at all. Okay? Due to many, many circumstances. They may be trying, because I'm sure it's not their intention to make the Leones be losing ground as such, that they have to pay high for other commodities, ones that we bring in. So therefore the cost is passed on to our people, because it is their responsibility to look after the people. When demand is high for the commodity, making available and meeting the demand is expensive. Again, the law of demand and supply. If the demand is high for the commodity, to make it available, it becomes meeting the demand, and that demand in turn becomes expensive, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, the costs or the government of Sierra Leone, under the leadership of retired Brigadier His Excellency Julius Maada Bio of the Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, have reactivated the Extended Credit Facility, ECF program. That is the loan that the IMF is giving or give to Sierra Leone. That's under the erstwhile government of Dr. Anesbai Koroma, the ex-president, who negotiated, or whose government negotiated this loan. That's for something like around a little over $200 million, 224. The first aspect of that loan was given, or was released to the government, which amounted to a little over $50 million. But this loan came as with conditions. Obviously, loans come with conditions. If I were to be loaning you my money, it's obvious that I will give you my conditions. And those conditions, the terms and conditions of that particular loan, will have to be met. In other words, there will be an agreement struck. And once it's agreed, then of course, we'll begin to release the loan. In this case, what happened? Some of the conditions that were tied to the loan was the removal of state subsidy to some products, which is now the toxic energy that we'll talk about, in other words, petrol. So removing the subsidy was one of the conditionalities of the IMF loan, or otherwise called the Extended Credit Facility. not only the petrol subsidy, there were other subsidies that the government was meant to remove. Rice, some basic commodities, everyday commodities that our people need so badly. The APC government received the first part of the loan. I think it was meant to be over a duration of 2 years, is it? I stand to be corrected on that. But then it was going to be broken down anyway. So 50 million dollars was released to the government of Sierra Leone at the time. And the second part of the contract or the agreement was meant to begin taking place, I think somewhere in December, early 2018, which would imply January, February, just when elections were approaching. It was not suitable by any chance for the government at the time, that's the All People's Congress government, to implement the agreement that they had agreed upon. So they will now renege on this agreement. Because it was going to be political suicide. It's no rocket science. That election was coming, and then you taking away state subsidy. I wonder what IMF itself was thinking. Were they complicit in trying to remove the government by using that kind of tactic? Because that would not have been popular, but yet that was part of the agreement. But again, I blame the sitting government at the time. They did agree to the agreement. They knew that this was coming. So was it they just wanted the money then? They would not agree to see through with the agreement? Because when the agreement time came up for them to facilitate the second phase of it, which was to begin the removal of state subsidies from basic items or commodities such as fuel and rice, the government said, no, because that was going to be an unpopular move. It was going to cost them votes, though eventually they ended up losing. Ladies and gentlemen, with the recent change in power, that is from All People's Congress to Sierra Leone People's Party, the citizens have been very filled with speculation that the country's ECF, that's the Extended Credit Facility, okay, and the duty exemptions, and the suspension from the fund may be renegotiated. And this is something that I really want to highlight. The people, because the agreement had been reached already, and this is a question to the audience. Could the SLPP have said no? That's one of the questions that were asked in the CAP. Could they have said no to this agreement? They're not bound to agree with it. That was negotiated with another government. Okay? Yes, you lose credibility when you don't do a follow-up on agreements previously signed by another government. But you equally have the right to renegotiate that agreement. So you're not doing away with it, but there will be parts that you're not comfortable with. So you can then go to the loaner or the person who is providing the credit, in this case, the IMF, and renegotiate the loan. Because under the terms and conditions under which it was negotiated then, if the APC was to renege on the agreed initiative, then there must have been something significant in it that needed to be looked at. In this case, the removal of state subsidy. Did they intended to apply to remove the subsidy? Had the IMF agreed to provide time for them? I'm trying to be a little bit theoretical here. Was that what they wanted? Okay, provide the cover. Let us continue with state subsidy. After the elections, obviously, we will address the issue of state subsidy as implied in the agreement. Anyway, they are gone. The SLPP is there. They had an obligation to renegotiate the loan. But there's also a question from me. Did we, or do we really need the loan? Do we? Because, again, I wish I had an expert here to break this down for us. This is the government's supplementary budget read by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Jacob Jusu Safa. to the sitting of Parliament, the statement of economic and financial policies for the financial year 2018. This is SLPP's own supplementary budget. Own supplementary budget. So I'm asking, could they have said no? And the answer to me would be yes. They could have, if they wanted. I mean, the world's greatest power, although it doesn't give them any credibility, especially in the way it was done, has pulled themselves out of many agreements. Many an agreement. Barack Obama's flagship, his legacy, which are very few, that will be the health situation in America. But on the international scale is the Iran deal, the 5+1 deal. Donald Trump said the agreement was not good enough. They gave away everything. Barack Obama gave away everything to the mullahs in Tehran. So therefore, it needs to be renegotiated. Do you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Renegotiate this deal to our terms and conditions. Some of the other deals he's pulled out of, like the UN climate change, he's pulled out of it. He's planning to pull out of the World Trade, WTO, World Trade Organization, NAFTA. So these are agreements that governments can pull out of. If it's not comfortable, they make the case, they employ their lawyers to make the case. Or you can certainly renegotiate these loans. But in this case, let's not drift too far away. The government did not. So this loan appeared to stand as it is. What was in this loan? What were the promises? We know that 224 or 225 million was promised. But what was also coming along with the agreement provided that the government of Sierra Leone did, which they have agreed, is it will unlock other resources from other developmental partners. That's quite juicy. That's quite enticing, isn't it? Unlock other resources from other developmental partners. The EU, for example, the World Bank, many, there are many. So that means the flow of money into the country. Well, if we were going to get this flow of money, why are the people in the country not feeling this flow of money? As was implied in this agreement, the extended credit facility agreement, why are the people not feeling it in their pocket? Our people are everyday people. They have to go every day to look for today, not even tomorrow's, because tomorrow is yet to come, but today. So even though this agreement promised to unlock XYZ, or am I just being too early? Is it coming later? If it's coming later, then let us know. But it is becoming inconvenient. We are seeing what's happening on the ground. We are getting calls from people. I mean, if the greater benefit is to come, which is a reason to hope, but this is no biblical thing yet. Like one of faith, I have hope. No, it's like, give me mine here now. Don't tell me that after I die, I will go to heaven, where the others hopefully have gone to. But where is mine here? While are others, having fun, having great time, and everything is going on for them? Where is mine? Why do I have to wait until I get to heaven, while others are having their flowers here on earth? So others are having a great time, and others are really struggling. We're looking at Jeremy Bentham, utilitarian philosophy here. The greater good for the many and not the few. But where is it? So we know that the IMF suspended the ECF. The conditions, the reasons that they gave for suspending it, I'm taking you back to 2017 That was when the All People's Congress was sitting. The reason that they gave was because of low revenue collection. I mean, anybody that come and make these promises that, look, we will live by this condition, that condition that you've given, even though you're tying yourself up as a nation, because now you become indebted to the person who's provided the loan for you, at the expense of your people, and yet you want to believe that it's for the greater good. Well, that is yet to come. But we've seen previous governments fail in this respect. And people are asking themselves, well, then why should we have faith in this one? Or could they just have done better? So the IMF said because of low revenue collection, driven by unrestricted tax and duty exemptions, and extra high budgetary expenditure. So that's why the loan was suspended in the first place under the All People's Congress. But according to our Ministry of Finance, what led to the development partners providing budgetary support to withholding what they were meant to release to the general public was these very reasons that the IMF gave. Fiscal consolidation was the basis of the extended credit facility, as was agreed by APC government in June of 2017. Fiscal consolidation was the basis of the extended credit facility, or ECF. From now on, we call it ECF, and we know that it stands for Extended Credit Facility. That was agreed by the APC government back in June of 2017. What the fund agreed to do was to finance a package of the 225 or so million US dollar to offset the balance of payment, payment shortfalls, control inflation, and build foreign reserves. Is it only me? On pen and paper, first of all, I don't subscribe to IMF at all. Let me make this known. But I'm trying to remain independent here, but I can weigh in with my opinion. For over 30 years ago, structural adjustment programs have not worked for us. All our professionals, our economists, they've spoken against this. Our local and foreign international friends have spoken against this because many years on, after the debacle back in the 70s and 80s, in which all the structural adjustment program did was to cripple us, was to provide us with an imbalance, economically speaking, to which we struggle. We can ascribe the blame to poor implementation, corruption, which obviously is always looming large. But we know that the adjustment program in itself has some selfish underlinings, which was to profit the provider and not those that were being provided with. And it was supposed to be the other way around. So we know that the structural adjustment program did not work for us. Why then, in the 21st century, 2018, those governments, our government, go in for this kind of loans? How is it going to help us? How are we going to finance this? And the irony of this is, when you look into the government supplementary budget, I mean, on pen and paper, black and white, it looks lovely, really, really lovely. Okay? But when you look at the implementation of it or what it implies, there is so much more to it. Sister Frances Fodi, welcome to the program. Bakari, welcome to the program. Sister Nancy Williams, Canada, welcome to the program. Bakari Lee, welcome to the program. My dear friend Momo Mohammed, welcome to the program. This is why I say we do have some foreign nationals that tune into our program, hence why we weigh in from our local parlance, Creole, and English. Understanding, please. Sister Cecilia Tita Topa, welcome to the program. We've got some couple of first timers here. MC Mary Kaba. Welcome to the program. We are talking about the increment in the price of oil, in the price of petrol, and the knock-on effects of the increment. I was just on the part talking about the IMF, the loan that was signed or agreed on by the erstwhile APC government, and the SLPP has now taken that loan. And I'm asking whether they should have. I mean, was there an alternative? Could they just have said no to the loan? What would have happened? Where is Thomas Sankara? We know what happened to him eventually, but the reason why I bring up his name is like, if we're going to struggle anyway when we accept the loan, why don't we just leave the loan and then just struggle and go on the basis which the SLPP government has promised that revenue generation will come deep from local collection? We know that is not enough, but that gives us strength from within to go to the IMF table and also table a package so that we negotiate from a position of strength, if you will like. We can't just go capping on all the time, please, to people that are not really going to help us. Are they really helping us? This is the question that we really need to ask ourselves. We see other governments, other countries continue to do well, turning their back, addressing leaders of the first world, if you will like, Western leaders. African leaders are now telling the masters or former masters, like, look, enough is enough. We don't want handouts anymore. You're not helping us when you give us handouts. These are handouts. The attachments to these loans, the conditionalities are not good for our people. And this is prevalent in the loans that we continue to sign for. And this ECF is just one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, our governments can do more. Look at Ethiopia. I'm not saying that they are not taking loans, but the loans are so tangible in terms of how they are playing out and how the citizens are benefiting. Look at Rwanda, to name a few countries. And as we look at them, these are modern metropolis. The capitals are modern metropolis that anybody, wherever in the world, can admire. The infrastructure, the tangibles are there. And then we continue to go for 200 million loans loan. So where are these other things that we talk about? These are our byproducts or products. Where's the diamond? Where's the gold? Where's the fisheries? Where is the bauxite? Where is the agriculture? And if this government has laid emphasis on these things, then why not say no to the loan? Or why not go there? Because let's assume for one moment that, yes, we need the loan. But those conditions with the loan, could we just have renegotiated and said, look, our people are going to suffer anyway, and they're suffering now. We've added 2,000 leons on top of already an unacceptable cost for fuel. And that cost is being passed on to the consumers, which are the people. And we know that over 60% of them are not employed. This is simple logic. So you can just imagine what is going on in there. Because if you were employed and you are being paid according to the rate of inflation, below inflation, or try to bring the digits down, from double to single, then most likely a situation of that nature will be manageable. But if we are going to suffer, there's an English saying, he that down fears no fall, then let it be. But then we've gone and taken the loan. That loan in a year or so will have to be refinanced. And then the cost of refinancing it is just going up. In other words, the interest is just going up. It's not stagnant. And it comes at the cost of the country, the many and not the few, because the few will benefit, as we can see, always the case, not only in our country, outside, not only in this government, but the other governments or governments before them, but the people who stay as governments come and go. Like one of my friends had a broadcast a few days ago, who spoke about, you're saying good things about the country to encourage investors to come into the country, which I agree with 100%. But you have to create that climate of stability. and you have to maintain it. It has to be sustainable, not tentatively, not for convenience, but it should be part of the fabric of the society, the culture, the structure of the society. And in this case, it's not. It is absolutely not. Ladies and gentlemen, let's share this video. We've got a few more minutes to go as we talk about this, and we will touch on one or two other things, but let's invite friends and families if we can, please. Okay? Let's invite friends and families if we can. So, as I was saying, even though the government of Ernest Bai Koroma committed to it, the SRPP could have turned their back on it. They could have, and I believe they strongly. But they too decided to go for it. And I said, like I said earlier, it was mouth-watering, the deal, because it was going to unlock other locked opportunities with our international donors and friends. Isn't that juicy? Isn't that tasty enough? Isn't that tempting enough? Yes, of course, that is. That definitely is. So they've gone for it. They've gone for it. And this is the fact on the ground. The price of petrol has increased. This is another fact on the ground. The people are beginning to feel the pinch. This is another fact on the ground. How the people will react to this, and they are beginning to react already. We hope that the government will, take a hold of this. There are many other things that are happening. Measures were meant to eliminate all import duty. The removal of such subsidies, okay, that's on rice and fuel in particular, by allowing petroleum products to be taxed and real market values. These were some of the agreements. And you can see this has effect on the people. The implementation of both subsidies were, politically sensitive. Just as it were, so it is now. It's a politically sensitive situation. That's why I ask. The Ghana government knew what they were playing with, but were they taking a chance? Because when it was meant to be implemented, the second part of it, they reneged. But they just playing games, waiting for election to go by and then jump on the bandwagon again? Or were they going to, live up to the expectation of the people? That's why I ask again the question. In this case, who is fooling who? There was state subsidy of petrol back in 2016. So while at the pump it did cost 6,000, in real effect, in real terms, it was something like 3,000 to 3,500 leones. So it was being subsidized by government up to the tune of half of the price, between 3,000 and 2,500. So you could pay for it at the pump 6,000. Now it's another 8,000. So another 2,000 has been added on top in a short space of time. And all of this on the back of the people. Okay? On pen and paper again, it sounds and looks very good. Sounds and looks very good because measures to eliminate all import duty and GST, which is goods and services tax, which we will call a value-added tax, VAT. There were meant to be exemptions, as well as the collection of royalties from mining companies based on published market prices. So the Ghana government, if I will understand this, had measures in place in which royalties were not being paid by mining companies, or even if they were being paid, not at present day market value. And there were many exemptions, duty waivers at the port of Freetown, for example, Waterkey. So there are some good things in this agreement in which, when implemented, should benefit the people. That was these duty waivers. There were millions, if not billions of leones that were being waived, due to kleptocracy, nepotism, and cronyism. These were the people that benefited largely. Mining companies, the royalties of mining companies were below par, below average. Some of these royalties in different forms and shapes found their ways into the pockets of the big wigs. So the IMF say, look, part of the conditions here is these duty waivers will have to be stopped. In other words, you have to relook at all of these, because we know that corruption is rife there. We know that people who enjoy these waivers are mostly not meant to. Yes, our NGOs, our international partners, some of them, because they bring items into the country that are meant to help for developmental purposes. So yes, of course, government wants to give such people duty waivers so that the cost can be less, so that the burden can be less on our people, because everything that government does or should do should be for the better good of our people. So it's like, these are the conditions. But what the present government is doing, we must say this, is it's a difficult one. I know that they are trying to do well. I know that they mean well. The president, certainly, I can speak, means well. But the speed, the race to which is being done. Last week we talked about it. If your engine is built for 40% or 40 miles per hour, and you're running it at 60 miles per hour, which this is what it seems like this government is doing, then it's going to crash. I say this, and you see the narrative I've built up. So it's not my intent to say that or wanting it to crash. I believe in the greater good. I believe, and I've said this over and over, that when this government succeeds, the country succeeds, the people succeed. How good and pleasant it will be for mankind, to come together and enjoy the benefit of the nations. And in this case, our nation. So I mean it. But traders are now being taxed 100%. Goodness, 100% of goods and services tax. Come on, man. This is not realistic, because they're going to buy. They won't stop buying, and government will continue to have the money that they set out to have, because the traders are buying, but then the cost is being passed on to the people, and the people cannot handle the cost. So cost of living is going up, and people are becoming uncomfortable, and people will begin to protest, and it becomes a social problem, and the government will have to deal with this, and it's going to cost the government money. So everything now begins to go back on the reverse. Government, please have a second look. Conduct polls around the country. AYTV is doing well by going around and interviewing people so that you feel the heartbeat of the nation. You feel the heartbeat of the nation, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Cherno Jallo, welcome to the program. Thank you for all your materials that you keep sending me. Really, really appreciate it. Sister Rosalind Bangura, welcome to the program. Thank you so much, for joining the program. Ladies and gentlemen, your commentary will be very much appreciated. Let us know what we say, how we say what we say, whether we're doing well or not. Negative, positive, we want to see those comments because we'll learn from them. Also, please don't forget to visit the YouTube page. There's a YouTube page to this channel. And please don't forget to subscribe. Subscription in this case has nothing to do with money. It's just to boost up my numbers. Okay, it's a number game. So please don't forget. Today we are talking about the cost of petrol and the impact that it has got on our people. We are talking about the cost of petrol, and we are also looking at the supplementary budget read by the Finance and Economic Development Minister, Mr. Jacob Jusu Safar. Okay, just a reminder as well. Hello, caller. Will you state your name and where you're calling from, please?
Yeah, brother, my name is Victor Spain, and I'm calling from the UK.
All right, Mr. Spain, welcome to the program. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear the first caller on the line. If you can't, please make him known in the chat room. Mr. Spain, what contribution would you like to make, please?
Yes, sir. It's a quick one. I'm going to base my contribution on the disadvantages of subsidy in the country, because you talked about what the present government have done, but what I noticed you didn't talk about the effect of subsidizing the country.
You're welcome. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you talked about Venezuela, which is a very, very good example. But you didn't talk, you didn't mention why their country is where it is today. So Venezuela, in the days of Hugo Chavez, was one of the richest countries in the world because they have a very good reserve of oil. And their revenue account for, let's say, over 90% because of the oil. Yeah, but this is what happened. During the days of Chavez, the country was more like a socialist country. And most of the goods services were subsidized. So what happened? Something happened in 2014. The price of oil fell drastically. We saw the effect in UK. We were buying oil almost less than a pound per liter. So it affected the country massively. So now what happened? Things went bad, very, very bad for the country. Because their country was run like a socialist country and many things were subsidized. When the oil fell, most companies didn't find it okay to continue doing business in Venezuela. They all ran away. And today, I'm going to make it brief, if you want to know, can you tell me the exchange rate of Venezuela dollar to the pound? I'll give you the figures. Yes. It is over $150,000 to the pound.
Okay.
So why am I saying this? This is why I'm saying this. We are not very happy because DO and the government removed subsidies in our country. Yeah. But we also do not think that our economy is very fragile. So if we continue on the path of subsidies, we run the risk of becoming another Venezuela.
Okay.
So subsidies have got its advantage, don't get me wrong, and I'm all for it. In fact, I am against DO accepting those conditions from the IMF, not renegotiating. I agree with you, that's what we should have done.
Right.
But then for the state, we all know what the state of our economy. I mean, continuing the path of APC, I think it would have been wrong. Subsidizing, the waivers. I think most of these rich people in our country had waivers on their imports. While in poor imports, they have to pay every taxes year. Most rich people in the city didn't pay taxes. They imported interest-free. So my belief is, if given time, I think DO will do well. Regardless of the suffering we're going through now, although they made the mistake of accepting the conditionality from IMF and continuing with that poor conditions that were given to our country, and that loan, which you clearly said they should have renegotiated or just abandoned it completely. That was a poor judgment on their part. Yeah. But on the case of subsidies, I won't frown on it too much because we know what can happen if anything goes wrong. We saw it in Venezuela. A country that we know is just imagine, over 150,000 from one via Equatorial Town.
All right. Can I just say something? I was waiting for you to finish, and then I will touch on it. But while you've made several salient points, of course, I do agree with them, and you were saying I didn't touch on a thing or two, which I agree with. But since we're making Venezuela almost in this discussion now, like a case study, and from what you are saying, which is correct, you equally haven't made a very strong point on the most of the reasons on why Venezuela is suffering today. It's not because it's a socialist country. Socialist principles are applicable in the world all over. Even in the United States, there are certain subsidies that are there. Even in England, where we are, there are state subsidies on certain goods and services. So state subsidies is nothing new, and it's nothing really wrong with it. It has to be well looked into, well-researched policy as to whether subsidies should be provided. In our case, back home in Africa, most times it's a little bit different, but there is a reason behind it, because the vast majority of the masses cannot afford it. Imagine if state subsidy had not been applied to the cost of fuel, and other basic commodities. How would have the people fare? You want to answer that? How would they have fared? Because over 60% of them are not working. What's the means of earning? So it becomes difficult. It becomes a social problem. This is where the socialness of the term comes from. It's a liberal idea, here to help people. It's just like the welfare state here in England. That's subsidizing the NHS. The government pays into it for me and you to enjoy those benefits. So that in itself.
Yeah, can I answer that? Can I answer something?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Spade.
In terms of the NHS, we all contribute. Our national insurance it goes to the NHS.
Yes, Mr. Spade.
So, our government is refusing to put more money to the NHS, but everyone is chipping in.
Well, yeah, I agree. I'm not saying they don't. The broader point here is the government still provides money into it. That's subsidizing. What it is not comfortable. But let me touch on Venezuela quickly.
Yeah.
I would say it's not because that they are a socialist country. Socialist principle is good, and it's applicable even here in the UK. Some services are social. are social. The basic foundation of this politics is social, because it's got to be social. It's sometimes the word and the application and too much of it, like socialist, that's what becomes problem, because when you say socialist, it's like, sounds like communism. It sounds like it becomes.
I think you're misunderstanding, because I myself am a socialist, but in the case of very similar, the catalyst was to drop in the price of oil, which I said, and also many of their policies introduced by Hugo Chavez also backfired. Because before, in order to make basic goods more affordable to the poor, the administration introduced price control and capping money to pay people. This didn't work as well when things went bad. Because these are the things how the price control, capping this, and then putting subsidies. I think that's the only way to go in Venezuela right now.
Mr. Spade, are you aware that it is sanctioned? Because this is what I should have said, and just leave all of the rest. Are you aware that it is sanctioned that is crippling the Venezuelan economy? Are you aware of that, sir? So it's not socialist. It's not being socialist. It's sanctions upon sanctions. Just like the Iranians. The Iranians are not socialists. It's sanction upon sanction. In the case of Venezuela, it's the sanctions, the heaviest of sanctions, that has been imposed on them. They sit on the heaviest amount of crude oil. The point here is the sanctions. It's not socialist. It's not because the system is socialist. I agree with you.
But the problem was, the catalyst of their problem was the drop of oil in 2014.
Yeah, but they could have shown that cause. Listen, Mr. Spade. The same thing happened with Russia. The same thing happened with Russia. Russia could have been crippled because then the country was a rentier economy, largely dependent on oil. But because they had a heavy reserve, and so was Venezuela, they could cushion the drop. They could cushion it. But because of the extended sanction, even as we speak, There is a policy for regime change, which you're not talking about. And that's what the problem is. And it lives just at the border of a country who wants to see the government go down. And the government is digging deep and saying, we're not going anywhere. And because of the SWIFT banking system, they are now a victim. The same thing that was applied to Russia. But Russia was smart enough to circumvent it. That's what happened. So largely, it's as a consequence of how do you call it, sanctions. Yes, the policies could have been mitigated a little bit because, yes, Hugo Chavez hugely, subscribe or subsidize facilities and welfare and etc., which made him a very popular president. But it did come at a cost. But what he was using the national wealth in behalf of the people, taking the people away from favelas, your ghetto-likes, and making them, because the system was poor. If you read the history, we need to make progress, Mr. Spain. Any other addition? Contribution, please?
No, thank you very much. I think that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
You are always welcome, my brother and friend. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's like the goods and services tax is a value-added tax, as we know it here, which is VAT, as most of us will know it. It's a tax that is levied on most goods and services which are sold for domestic consumption. So it's the same thing down in Freetown, the goods and services tax. It's tax added, which is sold for domestic consumption. And the problem here I was saying is, most of the people, the vast majority of people are not in employment. It's a day-to-day thing. It's like Alice in Wonderland thing, like magic, the Wizard of Oz, in which things happen like magically. So when you begin to pass on the cost of this added tax to the people, it stirs some kind of unrest. It rumbles. Because if you hit the wall, you can't go through, you have to come back. So this goods and services tax is paid by us, the consumers, but it is then remitted to the government by the owners of these businesses that are selling the goods and services that we seek, that we want, that we buy. And in effect, what the goods and services tax does is it provides revenue for the government. Ladies and gentlemen, do you get this? Because His Excellency Maada Bio's government has laid emphasis on revenue generation from local sources, from taxation. So therefore, the people now are now going to feel the burden. Because yes, you can tax the businessmen, they are going to buy your goods. You can increase the price of petrol. The transport owners are going to buy petrol. They're going to have their tanks filled. And they're going to pass on the cost to the people who can hardly afford it. So this GST is an indirect sales tax, ladies and gentlemen. And it's applicable to the cost of certain goods and services. So these businesses are going to add this cost of the GST. And we are going to pay the price. We will buy the wares, the goods, the markets. Okay? The way this thing works is like, I'm trying to make comparison because like you heard the brother last, we always make comparison to other countries, which is absolutely necessary. So most countries with a GST system have a single unified GST sort of, a single uniform GST kind of system. That's most countries. Most countries, absolutely. France, I believe, was the one that started this, some time ago, a few decades ago, and other countries have followed. So it means that with a single tax rate, this is applicable to the country throughout. And my question is this what is happening in Sierra Leone? Is this what is happening there? Some of the blame that we try to lay on the hype of fuel price was because the price was high, was lower rather, when you make a comparable analysis with other neighboring countries like Guinea, for example, and Liberia, for example. Some people are saying that petrol was being hoarded. So in other words, because the cost of petrol was higher in Liberia and lower in Sierra Leone, higher in Guinea and lower in Sierra Leone, petrol that was meant to serve the better good of the nation was being siphoned off to these two countries where the cost was high. Okay, assuming that was the case, it seems that there's a reverse in trend right now because as we speak, the President of the Republic of Liberia, His Excellency George Oppong Manewiya, has brought down the cost of petrol in his country. So it now looks like, I need to study that, now looks like the cost of petrol is less in Liberia and higher in Sierra Leone. So will that imply an inverse effect? Is it going to be the other way around? Is it going to be 360, in which petrol will now start coming from the other way into Sierra Leone because the cost of petrol in Sierra Leone is higher? But how do we benefit anyway? Because you're going to be selling it at the same higher price. So petrol is going to be available, but people still pay the cost. So the saturation of the material in itself does not help with the cost. It helps with the availability and probably demand, but the cost is already fixed. So it's not like because plenty of it comes into the country, so therefore the price is going to dip. No, it remains at the same 8,000 and the cost continues to pass on. The only benefit I will see is if the demand is too high and the commodity is scarce and it begins to come from somewhere else, it makes it available for those people who find it difficult to get. But in this case, it doesn't help with the price at all. Well, is this what's going to be the case, ladies and gentlemen? And this is my question. This is my question. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we're almost coming to the end of this program, but this is serious. I said that we're going to talk a little bit about free education. Yeah, I did mention free education. I've already looked into the supplementary tax budget, here from the SLPP government, which is quite interesting. And I really like it because this budget has got a feeling of nationalism in it. This budget has got a feeling of nationalism in it. A lot of it has got a lot to do with nationalism. Okay? A lot of it has got to do with nationalism. The taxation, the revenue collection, the focus, the duty waiver, the renegotiating of agreements and loans and the paying of taxes. Okay? While the government was happy to publish its first figure of how we managed to pay civil servants for the first time without recourse to bank overdraft facilities, they published this fabulous sum that they collected. But many weeks on and a few months on, we haven't seen the publication of further monies. On the issue of this subsidy, ladies and gentlemen, and on the issue of education, first of all, our value education. Last week, we talked about the political history of Sierra Leone within the context of education. I said publicly how emotionally, physically, and in many other respects, affected by the situation, the educational situation in the country, because I was fortunate to have gone to school where mental aptitude was of utmost priority. When schools, there was massive competition, there was motivation, and in fact, we were known as the Athens of West Africa, in which many a nation were the envy. We were the envy because of the background of our education, that most people will not see us for anything else other than an educated people. A system that used to produce lawyers, used to produce poets, engineers, accountants, barristers. It came to nothing. Okay? I came from a fine tradition of teachers. My dad was a teacher, my mom, a nurse before a teacher, my sister, my brother, my uncles, my aunts. Fine, proud tradition. But that tradition is no more. So what I'm trying to say here is I value education very, very much. Okay? So we know that the Julius Maada Bio government has appropriated a GDP of 20%, national GDP, towards education. Brilliant. We talked about it last week. But in the subsidy of petrol, the removal of it, again, that's why I needed somebody of a technical mind. Because when I look at the supplementary budget, what I do see there is the subsidy removed. Was it projected towards, or was it moved towards? Because that's quite an ambitious project, the education project, which is going to be free by September. I don't know how free it is. And you can see I did ask the question, free education, how free is free? Okay, because even the All People's Government, All People's Congress government had some levels of free education. I've read His Excellency Julius Maada Bio's education policy. different, a little bit different from that of the All People's Congress. Very much ambitious than the All People's Congress. But how is he going to fund it here? 20%, 50 buses are going to be purchased, and subsidies are going to be provided anyway. But what I was just trying to hit on is the subsidy that was removed from commodities such as petrol and rice. It appears, I may be wrong on this, but I stand to be corrected. It appears as if that has been moved on to education, which in itself is a good thing. But taking it off altogether from one item in which the entire length and breadth of the country enjoy, to another aspect which is of paramount importance, because an educated nation is a healthy nation. And by the way, I had issues with it, not because I do subscribe to education, but how do we go about it? The project is lofty, it's ambitious, it's a tall order, it is good in nature, good on pen and paper. Implementation, we talked about policy at some point during one of our broadcasts many weeks ago, in which policy has to be well thought through. I subscribe to an academic-based policy because that's the one that survives. That's the one that looks through and through whether it is necessary and when do we plan it out. Have we done our feasibility studies? Have we? I know there are inquiries and commissions being set up in terms of this, but this is different. We're talking about policy. Where are the civil servants in education that are meant to be championing this, that are meant to be looking at this? How is it going to work? What is needed? There is so much question to this in an ambitious project. Your Excellency, sir, if this is not well thought through, it may just be another white elephant in the room. And hopefully it's not a populous project. We promised this during the election debate, so we have to see it through. But does it come from our heart of hearts? And if it does, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to champion this? How are we going to plan it out? It has to be through carefully thought out policy, an academic-based policy in which the civil servants should be the one that should conduct this. And it takes over a period of time. It doesn't have to be done suddenly. When it's done suddenly, then it's trying to make a political point, trying to do political goal scoring. That's why I said that the machine is turning so fast that there's a potential for a crash. So the good intentions then become completely different. Ladies and gentlemen, we're almost coming to the end of this program. It's been a brilliant program, and I'm asking you to please invite, spread this video out to friends and families so that we all can have a debate, a healthy debate on this issue. Earlier on, we had one caller, and just before we close this program, Mr. Abedi Boateng, welcome to the program, my friend. Wow, Sebastian Weir, welcome to the program, boy. How you doing? Hope all is well. Greetings to the family. Sarah Mula Tarawali. Every time I call your name, I really like your middle name, Mula. Mohammed Karim Rebecca Niang. People with names, man. Cousin Donald Gigba, welcome to the program. Cause how you doing? Sister Esther Johnson, welcome to the program. We're almost wrapping up, but just before we close, ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to join me on this channel tomorrow. Alpha Saidu Bangura is going to be on this channel tomorrow. There's going to be a one-to-one, me and Alpha Saidu Bangura. We are going to be here tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Please don't forget to tune in. I will continue to send messages for you. So there are other challenges I was saying related to the subsidy on retail fuel price, including the difficulty of separating the retail and the commercial fuel markets, as well as the smuggling of fuel across the border to neighboring countries. That was what they were saying, basically, that fuel price was high in Liberia and lower in Sierra Leone, high in Guinea, lower in Sierra Leone. So therefore, the people were smuggling the product. Was it about scarcity? Because there's a difference here. We need to understand this. That's why I asked the question, who is fooling who here? Because to hold a petrol, a commodity of that nature, is a serious crime. It's serious that people can go to serious jail or serve serious jail terms for it. But that's not what I'm talking about. Because we're not talking about scarcity of the commodity. We are talking about the cost of the commodity. That's what we are talking about. And the subsequent impact on our people. That's what I'm talking about. And this is serious. So yes, they were siphoning it. His Excellency George Weah has brought the price of fuel down now in this country. So are they going to be siphoning fuel from Liberia into Sierra Leone? And if they do, it's just going to be plenty of fuel in the country, but doesn't really affect the price. Is it going to bring the price down? No, it's not going to. Because that in itself is crime as well, because it's going to be affecting the set out cost or price for the commodity by government, and that's law. This is legal. So there are many other things that need to be done. Okay, so when we're removing the subsidy off petrol, for example, and then it appears as if we're pushing it to education, so we suffering one side of the society while trying to raise the other. And I'm equally saying that the education policy should be a well thought out policy, Mr. President. If not, it's bound to fail. It's bound to fail. Ladies and gentlemen, we are making negotiation for a radio channel as well. Hopefully, God willing, pretty soon, we're going to go live on a frequency so that we can be able to broadcast messages to you during all times of the day, probably 7 days a week. I will encourage you to try and get a copy of the supplementary budget read by Honorable Jacob Jusu Safar, the Minister of Finance and Economic Development. It is good for us to be in possession of such documents so that we can read them ourselves, so that we are not told. It's complex, there are some technicalities there, but by and by, there are things there that we can understand because it's in basic English. But when it comes to the numbers, it gets a bit confusing because you will be seeing like trillions and billions and the rest of it, and there are some technical economic terms as well, fiscal and financial and monetary policies, which are areas of expertise that if we are not, or these areas are not our areas of expertise, then it becomes a little bit difficult to talk about. Okay? I mean, they lay so much emphasis on the holding of these fuel products to neighboring countries. And I don't know, is that the reason why you increase the price of petrol? Because the minister went on in his supplementary budget speech to Parliament talking about it. The holding is serious. Yeah, of course, it's serious because it creates scarcity. And once the demand, basic economics, the demand is high, okay, the prices of this commodity will jump up. It will jump up. So that in itself is a problem. But we are talking about on a governmental level in which the price is then gone up. You're not implying implicitly, explicitly, that the reason why you remove the subsidy is because of the holding of petrol. Is it because petrol is being sold higher in Liberia, so you're trying to keep it at par with the cost in Liberia to deter potential smugglers from taking the petrol from one country to the other? Is that the reason why? No, Mr. Minister, that's not the reason why. So I don't understand what all the emphasis on is being held into, or is this just excuses? That's why I ask, who is fooling who? In the end, it's me and you, we the people, who are meant to be benefactors of the greater good that are being shafted. The Englishman says shafted. We're right in the middle, receiving it from back and forward, left and right. This is what it is. And these things need to change. It's causing some unrest. A few days ago, an arrest was made because a member of the society said that he was going to demonstrate or protest if the price is hiked. The price did, and he demonstrated. That civil society, one of civil society leaders, I think Mr. Edmond Abu. Or did he do it in line with the law? That's another thing that we need to understand. You can't just jump out there. You've got a right to protest. It doesn't mean that you can just get up one morning and just hold a placard and stand in the middle of the street. No, you'll be arrested. There are many rules around this. So you need to ask for a permit for it to be provided for you because it's your right. That's what you're going to demand, but within the legal limits. Ladies and gentlemen, our people continue to suffer and there's great inconvenience in the country. Earlier questions that are asked is, could the SLPP government have said no to this IMF loan, the ECF loan? Could they have said no? Yes, they could have if they wanted to. They could have renegotiated the loan. You know, sometimes the applicability of some rules can be deferred. But if it's based on populism, and the enticing thing about the entire IMF loan is that it will unlock other potential international donors, the World Bank, the EU, and you name them, there are plenty of them. So that means there will be cash inflow into the country. But people are not feeling it in their pockets. They are only feeling the pinch. Because there's a significance in the jump of the price of petrol or petroleum product, the offshoot of petroleum products, be it energy. Because to even run your electricity green, you need petroleum product. And this is going to cost you because all of that, the price has gone up at the pump. The price of a liter has gone up from 6,000 to 8,000, and this is not boding well for the people. This is serious. I'm also saying that the government is moving too fast in the implementation of these policies. If your engine is built for 40 miles per hour and you're doing it at 60, the potential for a crash is imminent. The potential for a crash is imminent. Mr. Government, you want a people that is a happy people. Even in difficult times, because sometimes there's a necessity that the greater good will enjoy the benefit because that's the end objective. But there's the way to go across it, there's the way to put it. But in this case, it seems to be going the other way around. Because the people will have to be in agreement. It can't be forced down the throat of the people. Because when it is, there is a penalty to be paid. Remember, governments come and go, but the nation remains. The people remain. That's why the people have to be handled with utmost care and respect. One or two more things that I want to touch on just before we go is there's a brother on the social page, WhatsApp. He's always talking about this, and it's absolutely necessary. Post-election violence. And sometimes when we want to talk about a debate, it's unbelievable how people try to draw a moral equivalence with two wrongs. When you say this, it's like, well, they did this. What about previously? Well, of course they did it. It's documented. But that should not be the argument that we should be making to equate the two wrongs, because it doesn't make it right. Up to this day, people have been vandalized. Homes have been vandalized. People have been attacked. We are getting reports of these. And we are calling on the president to intervene. He's been very quiet on these issues. We know he's not a man of many words. Because I've seen him, even though he's had the kitchen sink thrown at him, he has never had time to really respond to that. And for this, I really admire him. That tenacity to remain cool and calm in the face of those kind of vulgar approaches towards him, things that are thrown at him, and not responding, not giving cause, to what these people may be aspiring to do at all. But that was then, and this is now. Then you were an ordinary citizen. Now you are the president of the republic. And the buck, I believe, stops on your table. The Americans say the buck stops at your table. Doesn't go beyond that. We know that the presidential powers in Sierra Leone is almost like the almighty, the all-powerful. So you are absolutely responsible for what goes on, sir. You see, there's something called posterity in which it will come to haunt you. Not only you, every other leader. That's why sometimes when you go back after you will have left power, you think on things that you possibly could have done that you didn't do, or which you could have done differently, given another chance. You've got another chance, and this is your chance, but you need to be careful. You need to go slow, sir. Policies need to be well thought through. It needs to be academic. we need to know who are promoting these policies, who are going to be the benefactors. Is it a greater good? Why are we trying to get these policies? What is the end goal? What do we aim to achieve? Many questions to answer before we set about going about it. And it should have the feel of the nation. The heartbeat of the nation should be behind it. This post-election violence is being extended to the mayor of Freetown, a respectable position, a position that runs apart with State House, not in the immense power that State House has, because yours is the four corners of the country, the entire country. But the mayor of Freetown is a powerful position, and is legally constituted. Why is the mayor being abused, and why we don't hear the government talking? Why is the office of the mayor being demoralized? Why has she got, the mud being thrown at her office, at herself? A woman that appears to be dignified, a woman that occupies one of the most serious offices in the capital, Freetown, who's got job to do. Why isn't she getting the support from government that she's supposed to have? Why is government not working in consonance with the mayor, in tandem with the mayor, concomitantly? Why is it? Is it because we dare to ask that she come from the other side of the political aisle? In other words, that's when she was selected. Are we trying to intimidate her so she can leave and then put in hours? I'm sure that's not the case, but she deserves better. She really deserves better, and we expect more of this government. Remember, the 100 days is over, and we said that we're going to hold this government accountable for things that they do right and things that they don't do right. Just like policies. It's what government does and doesn't do. Policy does not only imply only what you do, but also what you don't do. So we aspire to hold you responsible for these. Papa Government, Your Excellency, retired Brigadier Julius Madabio, now you are the president now, sir. But put things that go around you where you need for address. With people, obviously, they go through some difficulties. But they never go through the difficulty there. This is not a military regime, when a decree. This is a constituted authority. So under this, there's nothing suspended. The Constitution is in active service, and the people should benefit from this Constitution. So therefore, anything that is done should be done in line with the Constitution. You need for embrace you people, and the people that need for embrace you. Not one sector, you're not president for one sector or one section of society, but for all sections of society, the entire breadth and length of the country. That's what you're president for. So every complaint that reaches your desk has to be looked at. Because in the end, sir, this thing shall come to haunt you. It's over 3 months now since you won your elections. I sat here on this very stool and I spoke in your behalf. I still got faith in you. Because if you sat on the sidelines for over 20 years, 22 years, watching things as they were unfolding in the political landscape, and you have other intention for all that long, sure enough, you know what to do to get it right. But in trying to get it right, because some of the things that you're doing now is to get it right, but it's being done hastily and not in conjunction with the people, because the people will have to embrace it. In other words, if the people are going to be suffering, they need to accept that this is being done for the greater good. So maybe you just need to play your game well so that the people understand that what you're doing is not only for one side of the government, but for every Sierra Leonean. That's why you are doing it. Then probably they will embrace you. They will embrace the policies that this is meant for the greater good. So maybe we need to struggle and suffer now so that in the end we will benefit. But even if we don't benefit, but what is being done, our kids yet unborn and those that are now growing to become men and women, fine men and women of the Republic, will be the benefactors of whatever you do. But if it's not done now, and the people are just struggling, while others are doing well, then it is a problem, sir. And we should have the courtesy, with respect, utmost respect, to say this to you and the government. Another thing that I wanted to touch on briefly, Mr. President, is land grabbing is still going on. Land grabbing is still going on, and this is unbelievable. In as much as you stand for justice, land grabbing is still going on around yourself. And people, those of you that will listen to this tape eventually, take your complaints to the services. Don't relent. Don't give up. Say they're not acting. Continue to be resilient. Continue to take your complaint to the authorities. I'm sure when it reaches the office of the president, action will be taken. To the ministers, you've got work to do. Stop just trying to speak about the president. You serve at the pleasure of the president, we know this, but when you were appointed, is to serve the people of the country. So you need to get your work doing. All the time I keep watching these interviews and this TV, these guys just keep praising the president. Instead of talking about issues, instead of talking about policies, what they're doing or going to do. You need to come off it now. It's 4 months, and you've got like 4 years and 8 more months to go. It's not cast into gold that you're going to rule for 10 years. It's basically what you do, your policies. How popular were they? How did they resonate well with the people? Did the people benefit? Somebody said Jeremy Bentham, the philosopher, the English philosopher of I think the 16th century or so. The principles of utility. Look, I'm getting stuck with the word. Utilitarianism. That is the greater good. The benefit of the greater good for the greater number of people than the less. So, Mr. President, dear, take rein, take hold, and also you be in control, but not to everything they reach you. I have no doubt that you mean the greater good, but it's the way it's been done. This is where the problem is. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me again tomorrow. We will have Mr. Alpha Saidu Bangura, none other than Mr. Alpha Saidu Bangura himself, the man himself. Right here, same place, 8 o'clock tomorrow. Join this channel. Okay? I think I've said enough for today. Really, I don't say enough for today. And I believe someone will agree with that. And it's late now. 11 o'clock. We'll therefore go work tomorrow, Monday, and etc. But I want to say thank you to Una so much for joining the channel. And let me spread this video. Let me share this video. And don't forget to make Una comments, okay? Any comments will do, negative or positive, it will do. But we need to have a conversation with the people. And when I speak with no malice. I mean no offense to anyone. I speak from a perspective, a position of a nationalist. That's what I believe I am. Country first. I don't speak for green first, neither red first, but country first. Mr. Stanley Dwyer, I'm now closing. Long time, my brother. How is Australia? You just signed on, but I'm now closing the program. But welcome to the program. It's about country first. That's what I speak about. So please don't take offense. Please put your comments there. What have I said that's offended you? How can we do better? How can we raise the game? And for those of us on social media sites, let's stop these cheap arguments. Two wrongs cannot make a right. Accusing somebody of something today, instead of you making a tangible and strong point, you are talking about yesterday. Well, you did the same thing yesterday. What sort of moral equivalence are you trying to draw between yesterday and today, instead of us talking about the issue? Okay? Somebody said that a judge-led inquiry into post-election violence should be drawn or should be composed, and I subscribe to that. Because of the greater good, the benefit of the greater good. So please, let it be set up so that we can understand what happened there. Why did it happen? So that it will never happen again. The findings will draw conclusions on why it should never happen again. This is a nation deeply traumatized. And this goes directly to the people. As you struggle today, strengthen yourself, because there might be more struggle to come. If it's for the greater good in the end, even not by us directly, but indirectly for our children yet unborn and those that are coming up, let us embrace it. or if it's a selfish design, then of course posterity will judge those that bring this upon us. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to end and say thank you to you all. Thank you so much. And
Beautiful people,